Welcome to History of 40K, the 40K Lorecast series with John Barsotti and Brad Chester.
This guy.
On today's episode, we're talking more about 3rd edition of the game. On our last episode, we touched briefly on some of the rules that made this edition so memorable, and so today we're going to continue that journey. Joining us today, we have Snigs, who is the reason Brad plays 40K, so decide amongst yourselves if you like Snigs or not.
Nobody likes me.
The History of 40K is a once-a-fortnight show focusing on the history of the game of Warhammer 40K, on the tabletop, video games, movies, etc., but primarily focusing on the editions of the game itself and what made them, we're going to go with memorable, because I'd say good, but at some point we're going to talk about 7th edition in depth, so we're going to go with memorable.
I think we should talk a little bit more about how excited you were after you found out that fortnight was the word we were going to use for how often these come out.
It's fine. I was enjoying calling it bi-weekly because it's just this weird busted thing in the English language where bi-weekly means both every 2 weeks and twice a week at the exact same time. So everyone has to figure out, so is there 2 episodes this week or no episodes? Correct.
Boom.
All
yes. Right. The answer is check all.
Little recap from last week before we get going. So 1998, Games Workshop releases an update to their game. It's an entirely new edition marked as the 3rd edition. And this really is the creation of the game as we know it today. D10s, D12s, D20 dice, those are all gone. The whole game is based on a D6 format. And it was really well streamlined. It became a lot faster. So much faster that, for example, a Space Marine model went from 30 points in 2nd edition to 15 points in 3rd. So you could carry twice as many as you used to. And the game still took less than half the time because it was just a lot, I'm going to do air quotes here, easier to play. But as with all things Warhammer.
I mean, it actually was easier to play back in the day, though, because you had less options of shenanigans.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to be diving into today. But as with all things, it's not all flowers and rainbows. So some of the rules are a little bit clunky and some units were terrible and or amazing. But it was a relatively new game. I want to kind of start with, basically, if you go to the codex and you start going through the codex, the board itself. So we'll start there and we'll kind of have you guys fill in. Up until 9th edition, or was it 10th? There was no standard board layout. When did we get?
It was, or not. I mean, I think we got a little bit in 8th because people started getting GW layouts. So in 8th, when they did the revamp of the game from 7th to 8th,
okay.
The biggest edition change ever was 2nd to 3rd. And then from there, it was 7th to 8th as far as the total amount of how you play the game got changed. And that was a huge deal coming in.
You mean going from a dumpster fire to a not dumpster fire was a big change?
Well, it was, yes, but it was. I mean, it was really, really good. Don't get me wrong. From that to that. But 2nd edition was just completely, you had a lot of people rebelling against this at the time.
Yeah.
Because the 2nd edition, people had a good time. It wasn't like 7th edition at the end where everybody's like, I would rather get an ice pick in my eyeball than play more of this. But so we went into this. Also, you got to think that the game was very simple as far as everybody in modern 40K is used to, what do we got? 8 different layouts of terrain just in GW. Yeah. But also you've got, tipping point, Dawn of War, sweeping engagements, Crucible. Every single game at this time of 40K was played on pitch battle, 12 inches in.
Yep. And let's actually talk about the board itself, because this is one of the things I really enjoy. So the rule book itself had ideas and references to things you could buy at a hobby store to make your own terrain. So people would go to, someplace and buy supplies, but most of them are made for like fantasy, bolt action, and D&D. So I like that you kept seeing like boards in this era that are this bright green with lush forests and flowing rivers. And it's the grimdark future full of artillery.
I do have to say, one of the things I miss about old 40K, besides the fact you had no idea what you're going to play on, except for what I think it was Nova was the only one that had set terrain.
No, Nova didn't even have set terrain.
Remember they had the
later.
Yeah, I would say they had the Nova layout. It was actually considered the
Was
Nova
that
layout
third though,
because
or was that fourth or fifth?
I can't remember.
That was
To be honest with you.
later. That was
Yeah.
fifth, sixth, seventh before
Well,
that even happened.
But the thing is, what I do miss is that we played on a whole bunch of different types of terrain because a forest, you had forests all over the place because you could only see in 2 inches or you could only see out 2 inches of a forest. You had things that caused terrain test. Your vehicles could get difficult terrain tests and get immobilized where they weren't destroyed, but they were stuck. And I did like having more stuff than just cities. There was plenty of problems with it, but I also like the fact that we played on a lot, and we also didn't know we were going to play on. Think about the time, Snigs, when we're making lists back in 3rd edition. You had to kind of plan for, am I going to be on Planet Bowling Ball? Is it going to be heavy? You had to kind of make an army
funny. I
that could
forgot
do
about Planet
whatever.
Ball. Like that was even in 8th edition, it would still pop up every now and then. Cough, cough, Adepticon. But for the most part, being honest, like
you're not wrong.
Here's a hill. What does that do for me?
Nothing.
It's a
Nothing.
hill.
The other thing you're missing out on is that you also had to talk to people, especially the guys running the events, about forests, because in the 3rd edition book, there were 3 types of forest.
Yep.
And dense forest you could see into or out of 2 or 3 inches. Regular forests were 6 inches, and then light forests were 12 inches. So they were all different.
Yeah. And I also want to point out, I think today we play on how many pieces of terrain are on a board? Is it 12?
Yeah.
Well,
it depends if you count them as separate pieces, because the L's are technically 2 pieces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, it's 12 plus.
Yeah.
If you count.
There's 6 large, 2 medium, 4 small.
Yeah. I was that.
But if you count them as,
I knew get it right.
It depends if you're counting them as 2 for 1s, because they technically are 2 connected pieces.
But yeah, I mean, back in this era, there'd be maybe 6. Maybe.
Most boards had maybe 6. In fact, it wasn't until the end of 3rd, beginning of 4th, where they started using the measurement of approximately 1/4 of the table
had to be terrain.
To be terrain.
Yeah. I mean, because it's actually
they did this crazy too. So what tournament organizers would do is take the terrain for a table and jam it into one corner, like legitimately one corner, to make a quarter of the table. A quarter of the table has terrain. It didn't matter what it was, as long as it took up space to be a quarter. So it could be the world's worst terrain, but it was a quarter of the table and then got put out.
I mean, I laugh in the 2nd edition codex. The 3rd edition codex, you can see people playing at GW playing on a board. And I'm looking right now. It's a deployment map. I see 4 pieces of terrain on the deployment map. That's in the codex.
Well, some things actually made a difference though, because like roads didn't make a huge difference, but like if you were in a vehicle, you could actually go faster on a road. That was a real rule.
Yeah, the rules are great, but I
water.
Laugh about it.
If you had a Chimera, it had the amphibious special rule, which meant that you could go through water without any penalties.
The 3rd or 4th. That might be 4th. Amphibious.
That might be 4th.
That might be 4th, but I'm just saying that we had a lot of different stuff, but you had to be ready for a lot more things. I would have to say the competitive balance of boards is wildly better now, but you had a lot more.
Oh, the creativity is better. I mean, because again, in practice for this, I was reading the codex, and you had stuff. I laugh that you have 3 types of terrain: normal, impassable, and difficult. And the normals, a grassland, a hill, a street, flat land. The impassibles got funny. It was like you had lava, toxic waste, an ocean. And even like the difficults were peat bogs, which is just the most European thing you could possibly write in a codex, was every now and then you're running up on a peat bog.
Well, some of the things you had to remember about 3rd edition and terrain is you also had to talk about it was player placed terrain.
Mm-hmm.
And then you rolled off for side. So people who had certain types of armies would actually risk putting all the terrain on one side of the table for that chance to just go first.
And just end the other opponent. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and the weird thing is you had to put X amount of pieces had to go in your deployment zone. Some had to go, but you could put all on one side and just say, screw you, which happened quite a bit. Cough, cough, pajamas, who would consistently make the dumbest boards ever. And it'd just be like, I'm just going to win the roll.
Yeah. Before we kind of move on to movement phase, I do want to talk about forests for a bit. Cause I think it's one of the most important rules of the edition was forest and jungle, because it came up a lot because it did pseudo block line of sight and movement. If I'm honest,
it did.
Yeah. So,
well, if you're on the other side of a forest, you couldn't see if it was a dense.
Yeah. So it was, if I'm reading this correctly, if you were in a forest, you could see 6 inches out of the forest, or if something was in the forest, you could see 6 inches into the forest. That's how it was set up.
Well, depending on the forest.
Yes, we covered that. So, and that's an interesting concept to me, because obviously it's going to come up in our next cast. We talk about some of the units who had certain advantages when it came to forests and jungles. But yeah, the idea that a terrain would you could see partially into it. If I'm behind the forest and not in it, and you're on the other side, and that distance is less than 6 inches, can you see me?
Depends.
Okay.
What forest it was, because the dense ones, if you're on the other side of a dense forest, you just couldn't see forever.
But one thing is, if the forest, let's say a forest is 4 inches long, a 4-inch long forest, if I'm standing on one side, I can see 2 inches out the other side. Cool.
But if you're on the other side of it, you couldn't see it all.
And then okay, all right, fair enough.
And also, it like when you moved into difficult terrain, you had to make a difficult terrain check. So if you were infantry, all it meant was you only got to move X amount of inches.
Well, yeah, let's actually talk movement then. So next thing we do is actually talk about the movement phase itself, because this is also wild for a 10th edition player, because there wasn't a lot of if you pull a Codex Emissary, you'll notice there's no movement on your data cards, because everyone had the same movement.
Almost everyone. Yeah. There were some minor variances, but yes, almost everyone moved the exact same.
Yeah. Eldar always get nice things. That's a rule. It's every troop moves 6 and every normal vehicle moves 12. And some special vehicles went 24? Question mark?
Well, you would turbo.
You could turbo.
You get turbo, which would.
That was just.
I don't remember that. I don't remember turbo being in 3rd. I think that was later.
I think I might have got a 4th, because that was bikes and glancing. Because you could do the turbo up with falcons and wave serpents. You did the falcon.
Well, the bikes and jump pack troops all moved 12. That was their rule. The walkers moved 6. The vehicles, if they were a fast vehicle, they moved 12. But if they moved 12, they got to fire so many guns.
Yep.
Whereas a normal vehicle could only move like 6 and still fire its gun.
That's right.
But if you move fast, you either had a better save or you only got hit. You can only get glancing results.
Yeah. There's also cavalry in this edition, which I'm going to save my anger for another day. Snakes. I'm not a big.
Also move 12.
Yeah, I'm not a big proponent of horses in an era of assault cannons.
Well, in this edition though, you saw a huge amount of people in transports, especially combat armies, because in this edition you could move your full distance, get out, and then charge.
Yeah. And
also in 3rd edition, there was no rolls. You just charged 6 inches.
Yeah. So yeah, but we're going to cover more of this later. But there's something called Rhino Rush. And Rhino Rush was exactly this point, where Brad's point is if you all move 6, or you could be in a vehicle, which you move 12, and then you get out of the vehicle within actually 2 inches in this era, and then you could just charge out of that vehicle. So what is in 10th edition restricted to only a few units having assault ramps was...
Well, let's talk about the actual strategy of Rhino Rush, because you would move all your vehicles up 12 inches. You would pop smoke, which would make it so that you can only be glanced on the chart.
Ugh.
Which made it so that for one turn, you probably weren't getting blown up.
And then all your troops would get out.
Also, we should probably also mention that if I put a unbroken line of guys in front of you, you can't see through them in 3rd edition. Thank you very much.
That's right. I forgot the troops could screen for a tank.
Yep.
You could not see through models.
couldn't see through bases. So if you went on your models base to base to base, like if you were bringing orcs, you took a bunch of Gretchen and they basically did hands across America and walked up. And or you took a bunch of fast vehicles and you bumper to bumper them across and no one could see behind you. That's also why we got away with so less terrain, because you couldn't see through models.
I forgot. See, it's funny. I forgot that, because I didn't play in the edition, but you heard about it. I forgot that the units could do it, or the troops could do it. I knew the vehicles could. I remember you used to be able to block out line of sight with vehicles. I didn't realize that I could take Gretchen and screen out my truck.
Yes.
Sounds
Well, this is also the edition with templates and guest weapons and night fight.
Yeah, actually, let's move on from movement, because it's kind of, that's right, it's a good transition to shooting. So let's go with the shooting phase. As we talked about last time, you have to have line of sight. There is, and which is interesting, but before you would shoot, if I'm reading the rule book correctly, I was allowed to pivot my model 360 degrees because it had to be.
You weren't.
Please.
Back in the day, you had to make your weapons that were mounted on pintle mounted be able to move, because you would actually turn the weapon in a wildly illegal move in 10th edition 40K.
Oh yeah,
you had to move your weapon to where it was shooting.
Well, amazing. So if I hold a model, because I'm thinking like a lot of like Space Marine and guard models, the rifle's facing like 90 degrees from where their eyes are facing. So which was it? It was the weapon or the eyes?
Infantry was the fine, because you were shooting from the base.
Okay.
Infantry was technically ruled 180 front. So if your model was positioned backwards, then you couldn't shoot. But
vehicles, if you shot from a vehicle, you were shooting from the actual weapon facing. And weapon facings had either 45-degree arcs, 180 arcs, and a couple weapons had 360s that were mounted on the top. But you had to turn the weapon to face what you were trying to shoot.
All right. And
they were also 90s as well.
And then if I'm beginning, I'm just basically reading the codex to us as we're going along with this. So then from there, obviously no pre-measuring. So you declare your shooting and then discover if your math is good, Yeah.
Well, it's also your facings on that were a big deal on that, because you weren't pre-measuring. So you would have to set up and gauge what you were doing and then get your tape measures out, because there was all kinds of arguments about whether you were shooting, what facing you were shooting.
So at this edition, shooting, it sounds like shooting's been the same through every edition. Roll a d6, your weapon skill, roll equal to your weapon skill or higher.
No,
it's goofy.
To hit in third edition was 7 minus your weapon skill or your ballistic skill.
That is true.
Oh, I misunderstood it.
The higher your weapon skill or ballistic skill was, the better you hit.
So you did inverted.
And
it was 7. So if I had a weapon skill 3, I hit on a 4.
Well, it was worse. It was better then. There was no maximum modifiers. If I said you were -8 to hit, you were just -8 to hit. Yeah. And if you couldn't roll that number, you couldn't hit me. There was no auto 6s. It was just go screw yourself. So things would have huge weapon skills because they would effectively be hitting at -3, but always, 1 always failed. So you would roll your die and put the modifiers on it. So it was a big deal to have characters that had ballistic or weapon skill or ballistic skill 7 or 8 and stuff like that. And you go, why would you need that? Because there's modifiers. Because if you ran and then shot, but your opponent also had moved, or your opponent was moved fast, it was minus to hit. There was a whole slew of minuses that you could put on somebody.
Okay, so that was different. The other one that's different is the to wound, which is a very goofy chart, if I'm being honest, where you have your strength and your toughness. It doesn't feel linear.
It is linear.
It's the same.
It's
ish.
Yeah, ish. This is also where we have to talk about the fact that if you were double your toughness, it was auto death.
Yeah.
It didn't matter how many wounds you had.
Yeah, that's true. So you had insta death. So because a lot of things could actually like buff their wounds up to ridiculous times. But if you were toughness 4 and you got hit with a strength 8 weapon and you failed your save, it didn't matter if you had 100 wounds, you insta died. The other thing is it's not like today where if you go up to punch a vehicle and you have 100 guys and you're just like, well, we just need to get sixes. If I got in, it happened a lot with the Wraith Lord, for instance. If you grabbed a bunch of Marines with a Wraith Lord, the Wraith Lord was toughness 8, Marines were strength 4, they could not wound it. There wasn't a 6 auto did it. If it was double, you just weren't allowed to do anything to it.
Yeah, the scale is if you were 1 above, you'd wound on a 3. If you were 2 above, you wound on a 2.
Yeah.
And then it went the other way. If you were 1 below, you wound on a 5. 2 below, you wound on a 6. I think it went 1 more. So if you were 3 below, it was also a 6, but that was all the further it went.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. And so, yeah, it looks like you still have to roll a 2 to wound. But I guess what you're saying is if I did roll that 2, they get no armor save.
Oh, it depends on your AP.
Okay. Which is...
Armor penetration is wildly different back in this. In 3rd edition, if you wanted your AP to be as low as possible, because if you had a 3-up save and I had an AP3, a missile launcher was AP3.
Right.
So if I hit your Marine with an AP3 weapon and I wounded, you just don't get a save. Just
unless you were standing in ruins and then
True.
you had a 4-up invulnerable.
Yeah. For some reason, the cover save.
Yeah, not the thing anymore.
It would
I love the cover save only because I'm an orc player where the idea is you shoot me with a like las cannon and luckily I ducked behind these bricks and that means I get a 4.
This is a big deal though because the terrain pieces tended to be smaller. So Snakes has a bunch of high AP weapons and I want to get a save. I'm like, I'm going to take my 4-up cover save. But this is also an edition where there was tons of 3-inch and 5-inch templates.
Yes.
So if you jam, you're like, I really want to get a save against his missile launchers and his las cannons. And then he goes, eat templates, chump, take 600 saves,
I also do like that in the codex, they have invulnerable saves listed, and it's on the screen for people who are watching this. It says invulnerable saves or our weapons are useless, which was kind of the viewpoint of the invuln save because they were ugly in this edition.
Yep. And the thing is, it's wild in this because we had a lot less toughness though, because you actually had armor values, which we'll talk about in a minute, on vehicles. So like anything that was walking around that was not a vehicle tended to have very low. Like the Wraith Lord was the king of toughness with T8.
Yeah.
Yep.
One question on invulnerable saves. I'm trying to say it. So when you have an invulnerable save, it's not a separate save. It just means that you're not affected by AP.
No, the invulnerable save doesn't get affected. You could take it no matter what.
Right, but where is it? Is the invulnerable save? It's just their save, but they are invulnerable.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not. The things could turn to invulnerable, like turbo. But when you look, you're not seeing it right away because of the fact that so few people had an invulnerable save in 3rd edition.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I was looking at this.
There's just they people the chaplain with a Crozius, special characters. Like very few people had it. Thunderhammer, Storm Shield, Terminators. But like regular Terminators didn't have an invuln save until kind of deep in the edition, to be honest with you. They gave him a 5-up invuln towards the end.
Okay. That's childish and it seems mean. I'm being perfectly honest.
Oh, well, also power weapons just didn't give you a save unless you had an invuln save.
Yeah.
So like the lowly power weapon, which no one takes anymore, was one of the kings of weapons in 3rd edition.
Yeah, the power sword is incredible. We'll get to melee in a minute, but the power sword's just silly.
Well, yeah. I mean, the characters and sergeants and stuff are powerful now. Don't get me wrong. In this edition, you would juice up all of your captains, but your sergeants and stuff would all be carrying, because you had 4 guys with you that were high-fiving you as they were your posse. That like the sergeant did all of your work, because you also didn't get everybody's attacks. You got your attacks if you were base to base. Anybody not a base to base threw a rock, which is what everybody used to call it. You get 1 attack.
Yeah, before we get into melee, let's talk about shooting though, because I do want to talk about, there's a couple things. It's more what I want to focus on is what's different between this edition and current edition. So some of it's easy. Rapid fire weapons. Move half your distance, be within half range, 2 shots, over half range, 1 shot. If you move, it's always 1 shot though. So you couldn't move into range, which is like, that's a big thing I noticed, is that if you move, you basically lose the ability to shoot for a lot of this, or you're heavily limited in your shooting.
It was cool though, because there was a lot of things that counted as stationary platforms. Bikes and Terminator armor made a lot more. You saw a lot more shooty bikes and shooty Terminators back then because they counted as stationary. So it gave them a huge advantage moving around. So even though Terminators are generally considered slow, in this edition, because they could move and get full value for shooting, so could bikes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So question on that from a play standpoint, would you try to then kind of bait your opponent into moving so you could get more shots into them, or would you chase them?
1,000%.
So that was the
You
idea.
could also run people up. I mean, you're baiting.
No.
Yeah.
No, you never baited them into moving because they never moved. You never moved. We played multiple games, me and you, where we both went, no.
That's true. I mean, the answer is yes, I would love my opponent, so I would put something up so that they would fall for it. But your opponent's like, I'm going to hunker down here and murder you.
So that was more what it was. So then were assault weapons common then? Because that was the only one you could move and shoot.
No.
Not really. There were pistols. I think pistols were assault weapons, and flamers. I think those were the only 2 assault weapons.
And also, heavy weapons couldn't move at all.
Yes.
That's why it was such a big deal for bikes and Terminators. Because if you walked with a heavy weapon, it couldn't shoot, period.
Oh, I'm trying to think. The 8th edition, you were -1 to hit with a heavy weapon. I thought, and then the moving with heavy weapons. Okay, that was
back in 3rd edition. If you it also mattered for. I think you could. Was it model for model in 3rd edition, or was it the squad still?
I think it was model for model in 3rd.
Because most of the editions going up until 8th, you could leave the heavy weapon, and everybody else could move kind of around him to get better stuff.
Yeah,
because you couldn't shoot it. You weren't allowed to shoot it at all. If you moved. You had a las cannon, you were in a heavy squad. If you moved, that guy just hung out.
Ugh. All right, but let's have some fun. Talk about what I think is one of the most missed weapons of the edition, and it's the only time I'm going to give Brad credit on templates. That's guess weapons.
Guess weapons are awesome.
Guess weapons are an amazing idea. Obviously, we can't do them because we can pre-measure. But I love the concept of the guess weapon. And so the guess weapon, for those of you who are, listening or have never heard it before, it's artillery, basically. Artillery, mortars, and it's things that could fire without line of sight.
The thing is that you couldn't target characters. Characters weren't in units at this point in time. They were near units. So you could put templates, you couldn't target them, but you could. I could be playing Snigs and he would just go, hey, it's so weird. I keep getting all of my attacks on your captain. Oh man, it's crazy. I keep guessing wrong, even though I'm shooting a unit that's nowhere near there, because you could guess anything you wanted. So
let me kind of read off the rules of guess weapons, and then you guys can tell me how much of this I got wrong. So if I'm following this correctly, on a guess weapon, I would, first off, it had a limited range, and I would just say, I am going to shoot 27 inches. And I had to go straight. Correct? Or was I allowed to pick the angle? That's why I couldn't figure out from the rule book. If I say I'm going to shoot my mortar 27 inches, was there a rule in which direction I had to move it?
Yes. There wasn't a rule where I had to, but you had to pick a straight line and go straight through. You would basically pick the direction and it went that far.
I basically pick like a unit and say, I think that's 27 inches away, and I would measure 27 inches.
And also you're measuring from the gun. So if you're shooting your whirlwind, you would measure from the back of the vehicle on the gun itself.
Okay.
Yep.
Then from there, I'm going to effectively roll 2 dice. The first dice is the scatter dice, which is one of the cooler ones. It has 2 sides that say hit, and then 4 sides that have an arrow on it. And if it's the hit, it doesn't move. If it's the arrow, that's the direction it's going to move. And then I roll a D6 for how far it'll move.
Well, 2D6, depending on the weapon. Because it's 2D6, it's minus your weapon skill. It's 2D6 minus your weapon skill.
Oh, geez.
Oh, yeah. Because the sustained fire dice were gone at this point.
Yeah. So
yes, 2D6 minus your weapon skill.
Oh, God. So it could go if you're
bananas.
3, it could go 9 inches in the rando direction.
And it was different. It was a D6 or 2D6 depending on what you were shooting and whatnot.
Yeah.
So there was two different.
And it doubled if it was night fight.
Yeah.
Oh, what Brad knows about all that. We've discussed night fight in depth about why would a space marine wearing a helmet be able to fight in the dark?
So annoying.
With night vision.
With night vision. Well, he literally sees into every spectrum. Screw off.
Or Eldar, who can't fight in the dark, apparently. 65 million years. Couldn't figure this one out.
except for Dark Eldar, who weren't affected by night fight.
Well, they're dark. That's, I mean, you say this like it's confusing. But yeah, I mean, guess weapons are, it is funny. It's one of those areas I'd like to see them bring back. I don't know how the rule would work where maybe I fire artillery.
I love it, but the deviation dice, because you didn't want to smash in other people's models. Nothing in 40K, maybe besides what armor facing.
We'll get to armor rating in a bit.
Well, because you roll the DV die because the arrow would be pointing whatever way it goes. It was never next to what you were shooting, because you're not going to throw your dice at your opponent's models.
Yeah.
So you're rolling it somewhere else, and then the both of you would go, I think it's like this. And your opponent's like, I actually think it's like this. You're going
to move the hand across the board. Like, no, it's at this angle. Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming more savvy players brought protractors.
I mean, we did a lot of that. Also, guess weapons were guess weapons. However, if you took basic algebra, you weirdly enough were hitting quite a lot. I do like you could tell who skipped math and who didn't. How often did you see somebody guess, cough, cough, Mike, who would shoot off a table? They're like, okay, my vehicle's 6 inches long. I've moved 5 inches on. Your vehicle's about 6 inches up. The board's 48 inches wide. I guess 47. You're like, okay, well, you just hit my movement tray or my tray of models here. What are you doing? And then other people are like, look at the board, go, this, and go, 22.5 inches and hit somebody right in the face.
Yeah,
I never did that.
You mean the person who teaches calculus might have been better at this than other people?
Yeah, things like would laser sight your characters pretty consistently.
And then with the templates, I've heard this before, I want to verify. So you couldn't target a character, but if the template ended up on top of the character, would it still hit them?
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
That's the thing is also.
So you could aim short and hope to get lucky.
So like the character's standing in front of something and you can't target him, and you just say you're targeting the thing behind him. I mean, you could have no valid targets within 24 inches, say. And I would say, Snakes, I'm shooting your back board edge, your tank, and I choose 11 inches. And you're like, that's nowhere near. You're like, you couldn't stop me from choosing the wrong inches, and then I would just shoot a captain in the face.
Yeah.
That I could, that it couldn't target.
And that was part of the problem, and part of the reason why guess weapons also had a minimum range.
Right.
Most guess weapons had a minimum range of either 12, 18, or 24. Most common was 24.
But yeah, the Basilisk had a 240-inch range with a 24-inch minimum shot. So you would see if someone brought multiple Basilisks, they would have one all the way in the corner and all the way in the other corner.
Exactly, because that way you could actually use them. Okay. From there, I want to talk some about this more to bring people up into more modern K, 40K, some of the weapons from the time. And a couple of ones I wanted to hit on because I think it's a good example of just differences. So like assault cannons, which are on constant models today, and I think it's largely a useless weapon. It was actually pretty good back then because it was a 3-shot weapon. Yeah. 8 strength 6, so it's wounding a lot of stuff even on 2s, but 3s and 2s. AP 4. So you're going to wound most things in the game on 2 or 3, and unless they're wearing power armor, it would negate their save. Correct?
Yep. You'd pick all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
And then
those are disgusting.
It's funny because I laugh like then the plasma gun, which the plasma gun I think through editions has done this more than any weapon, where there's times when they're good and times when they're terrible.
Well, third edition plasma was the king.
Yeah. Because
plasma had more shots back in the day too.
Well, I mean, what I'm looking at is for plasma is a 1-shot weapon that was strength 7, AP 2, but blast. So it means this AP 2, that means it's strength. So it's wounding most things on 2s.
I mean, it's technically more shots because it's just it's a template.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
it's not blast. People think blast now, which is an extra shot per 5 guys. No. This is a 3-inch or 5-inch if you shot the plasma destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
that can just pick up a whole squad. Also, you didn't get a save versus it was AP2.
If you hit with plasma, you just died. And then there is melee.
Melee was vicious in third edition because, again, power weapons. We also had a couple people with sustained hits, which was just infinity hits if you kept rolling hits. But you could have, this is when characters and sergeants just dominated. First off, you just charge 6.
Yeah,
so you had to be within
I want to
6.
talk about the
You could
just
have,
charging 6 thing because it is funny.
well,
like,
going
as
through
someone who's
terrain, you
failed
also had to
charges on
roll.
Snake Eyes. Yeah, I hate. This is funny to me. Always just, I knew your charge distance every single time. It's one charge distance.
Well, you didn't get to measure though. So you had to really, a lot of times you would shoot your guess weapon, measure out, see exactly if you had a charge. Then you would move up and make sure that you had the charge because you could get your guys out just slightly off. Maybe you would pivot your guys 15 times illegally and try to charge in turn 1. No one would ever do that.
Actually, can I ask a question on that, if you don't mind? So on the assault move of moving 6 inches, if the enemy was 7 inches away, do you still get your assault move?
You got nothing.
So you only got the 6 inches if they were within 6 inches. You declare it, and if they were 7 inches, you didn't move.
You stood next to your vehicle and went, I would really like to be inside this vehicle, but I'm going to stand right here. Which is a huge deal. As someone that played some Dark Elder back in third edition, anytime you would goof this up, it'd be a real bummer. Or if you had to go through diff terrain, you're like, well, cool. Now, that's right. A huge, one of the things I do miss. Yeah. Terrain. This is a big thing on that I do miss a ton is initiative. Because fast units, everybody fought on their initiative value. You could also have people fighting at the same time. There wasn't you go, I go. It was just initiative step 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Let's take a moment before we talk about initiative about the order of combat because it is very goofy. In that,
I was saying that is the order of combat.
What I'm getting is it was this element of like right now the game for what decade plus almost multiple decades now. It has been your unit fights, my unit fights, etc. Yep. This was an era where, I'm going to use the Monty Python reference where they would both fight at the exact same time. And sometimes they could all die together.
Yes. Well, and that's the thing is if I charge things and I had grenades, or first off, if you charge into cover, we'll do the basics.
Yeah.
If you charge into cover, you fought at initiative 1.
So the cover would fight first. Always.
Correct.
Okay.
But if you had grenades, you would fight at the same time as them.
Question on the cover thing. Was it model by model?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, yes.
Everything.
It was model by model. Yeah. So
what I'm saying is, so if a unit, because I'm thinking of today, maybe I didn't play third, but it's common today where some of your models are in cover, some of your models are not in cover. So if I charge someone and some models are in cover and some models are not in cover, does that unit have different times it fights?
Initiative values. Your characters have different initiative. Your sergeant, depending on what he's equipped with, will have a different initiative value also.
That was cleaned up in 4th.
Yep.
But in 3rd edition, it was model by model.
So this was a really wild fight phase because it was
you would legitimately, you wouldn't even just fight by fight. You would fight initiative by initiative. So basically, you would go over all the combats on the board and fight everybody at initiative 10, everybody at initiative 9, so on and so forth.
Now with that, and we'll get to casualties in a second, but let's say I have initiative 10 and I fight and I kill. Does that mean they don't get to fight?
Correct.
Okay.
But no, you're saying if they have initiative 9?
Yeah, they're initiative 9.
Because if they're initiative 10, if they're both initiative 10, everybody gets.
If that was saying yes. So if I'm initiative 10 and they're initiative 9, I fight, I kill, they don't fight. But if I'm initiative 10, they're initiative 10, we both fight and we both stab each other.
Well,
both die.
Also, let's back up just a bit on this because we didn't talk about shooting. You could only kill what you could see.
Okay.
And that was also a super goofy rule because if you and Snigs are in the closet and I can see you popped out and I threw a grenade back there, only you would die. I can only kill what I can see.
Well, actually, but the opponent could choose. Yeah, I saw the opponent could choose what died.
Well,
except for indirect. Yeah.
Yeah.
except for blast weapons.
I say,
Anything
but sorry, blast. But if Snakes had 72 assault cannons, and you start right now, if Ted sticks his head out and is the only model that can be seen, you pick up the whole squad with your 50 shots.
Yeah.
Back in the day, Ted would die, and that would be the only thing that died in that squad. Only things that were visible could die, unless again, blast weapon.
I'm glad you came back to the assault cannon because it was kind of digging at me because there was a special rule for the assault cannons back in third edition, and I had to look it up to remember what it was. You did get 3 shots with it, but if you rolled triple ones,
Yes.
the assault cannon was destroyed.
Yeah.
It was gone. You couldn't use it the rest of the game.
Jam.
Yeah, there's some goofy weapon rules back in this era, and yeah, I mean, that's the fun with this. I also like because same with plasma. If your plasma got too hot on a 1, you just died.
Yep.
Not a separate roll. And actually, I mean, I missed that from I think it was all the way till 10th edition. That's what happened. If you fired a hazardous weapon and you rolled a 1, you died.
The word play there. Hazardous is new. It was just plasma on that.
Yeah,
because also it was on the hit roll, so it wasn't actually like right now. You fire plasma, you roll your shots, and at the end you take a hazardous check. If you rolled a 1 to hit, you just if you rolled a 1 to hit and you had a vehicle, you took a glancing hit on the rear armor of the vehicle.
I mean, look, as someone who ran Gilliman with a bunch of Hellblasters in the 8th edition, those 1s were cool. Always with an ancient, so that he would full rerolls they hit, and then they would die, and then they would just shoot again. Once dead. It was fair. But let's again, my favorite part though of Melee is the way you determine the hit. Because mildly different. We've established initiative. That's great. This is who's fighting. It was a duel.
Yes, it was.
So you would have it was determined, and the chart up in the for people who are listening to this, if you go to the YouTube page, you'll see I actually have a bunch of these images up. You had your opponent's weapon skill on the x-axis, and your attacker's weapon skill on the y-axis, and there was a chart that told you what you had to roll to hit.
I'm sorry, everyone, but I prefer this so much more.
It's cool. It's just irritating to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not that hard. You're just used to it. You just check between. But like, it should be easier to hit random guardsmen than it is to hit Chaos Emperor's Children flawless blades. You know what I mean? I shouldn't be hitting both of them on 2s. One's trying to actually defend themselves for the last 10,000 years.
And the other one's reciting the litany of ducking. And you know what? Those are equal things, Brad.
Sometimes it works, man. I just, it bugs me on that one. That's all.
Well, you also have to look at like the shooting to hit chart was very simple. It was just 7 minus ballistic skill and you were good. The to hit for melee was attacker weapon skill, defender weapon skill, and if you were plus or minus 1, you were 4s. End of story. So a 4 fighting a 5 was still a 4 to hit. A 4 fighting a 3 was still a 4 to hit.
Yeah, because I'm looking at that right now, and if I'm a 1 fighting the Avatar of Cain, who's a 10, I still can hit him.
It's on a 5.
It's on a 5, yeah, but I can still hit him.
Yeah, they maxed it. So for shooting, it was different, but for attacking, it was the best you could. It was 2 to 5. There was no 6s.
Yeah, it was 3 to 5.
3 to 5.
3 to 5. 3 to 5. Well, no, that's a lie. Certain special characters that you could never use in the edition could hit on it too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, but then I'm beyond this, of course. So the to wound was the same though. The to wound, it's the exact same chart for the wounding.
Mm-hmm.
But what is goofy is the saving, namely power weapons. So
power weapons are
power weapons, power fists, and power claws too were also different. So you had your power fist, and a power claw, which would double your strength up to a maximum of 10, and ignore armor saves.
Yeah, but they ignored armor saves. Same thing with monstrous weapons.
Yes.
Power weapons and anything that was a carnifex. Big creatures with monstrous weapons would ignore armor saves also.
And I like this.
Were sons of bitches. Nor carnifexes back then.
Well, the carnifex had its day, and it's been a while since that day. If being honest, like
there is a lot of carnifexes collecting dust over it.
There's a lot of
hold on.
old
Hold on. Where are you? Where are you in the basement? Behind you and to your left.
Yes.
But let's talk about the big thing. Let's talk about the bigger thing, because combat wasn't so easy peasy like it is today. You know, you took your wounds, you did your stuff. However,
Oh God!
whoever did the most wounds.
Yes, this is why. So at the end of the fight phase, you have to now take a really irritating test. So we're going to base it off of how many wounds you took.
Hold on, because it's not. It's in the magic of editing, because we just did 15 minutes of this and they went, hey, is this 4th edition? So let's go back to 3rd edition. Snigs, tell me how I did leadership checks after combat.
Yes.
So leadership was if you lost assault, you were -1 if you were below 50%, -1 if you're outnumbered, -2 if you're outnumbered 2-1, -3 if 3-1, and -4 if you're 4-1. So you could end up with a total of -6 to your leadership check.
And then the rundown was crazy, especially because you chased or fell back different. Regular infantry fell back 2d6.
Yep.
Jump pack and bikes fall back 3d6. So if I charged you with Blood Angels, Sanguinary Guard, which I don't even think existed back then, but a jump pack unit charges you and you fall back, they're rolling 3d6 to chase you down. You're rolling 2d6. If they equal or better you, the unit just dies.
Goes away.
Yeah. One question is, I was reading that earlier. Would they actually move it though? So let's say I would roll my 2d6 and I would 2d6 towards my back edge.
Because only the defender would move. So you would roll so if we just go 2d6 versus 2d6, you roll the 2d6. If you don't get caught, the defenders move. And they move they have to move in an exact straight line. They can deviate if they have a way to get around things directly, but you could also stop somebody. If you had a unit behind them in a half moon and you made them fall back, they died, period, because they have nowhere to go.
Okay. So, but
yeah, crossfire.
Just so I'm following. So it would be I fail. I roll my 2d6. I roll a 5. I don't move them until you roll. You roll a 2d6 and you roll a 5 or better. I just die. And that's the end of it.
And then no one moves.
Yeah. No matter what I like about this is it's no matter the size. So effectively, this feels like a good thing for orcs. So you in theory could be fully cut down. If an orcs, I don't know the rules here, 20 boy orc squad loses 5 to a space marine who loses 3.
And now back then they could be 30-man boy squads.
But you, in theory, a 3-man space marine squad could cut down 25 orcs.
I played a game versus Nick, where one warp spider ran down 3 different units.
I'm sure he appreciated that.
I was super excited about that. I was playing as your favorite, I was playing some Tau. So
you deserve to lose.
But the other thing is when you consolidated in somebody, they didn't just attack you. They actually treated it like you charged into them, so they got to shoot you.
Well, yeah, and you know what? Let's from there though, because let's say I make that. So let's say I do it. I roll my 2d6. I roll an 8. You roll a 4. So I do fall back. I'm not done yet. Now I've got morale phase, which is insane to me. This phase,
and if there's somebody within 6 of you, you can't rally.
Yes, you check your morale. If I'm reading this correctly, if I've taken 25% or more casualties, I have to take this test. If I'm defeated in close combat in the assault phase, I take the test. And if a tank breaks through my line, I also have to take this test. Once I've taken the test and I'm broken, now I can't recover until I'm at least 6 inches away from my enemies and 50% or greater in my number of units. So I guess my question is, if I fail morale, 30 boy squad. I know orcs had a weird way of doing it.
25 or less.
No, it's 50%. You have to be above 50%.
So
or you
it's
just
the 4th
running forever.
Yeah.
Unless you're Marine. Feel no fear, actually. You could rally at anything.
But again, third edition, if you were below 50%, you did not rally. You just kept running off the board.
But you could
That's
shoot.
so it's over. Basically, there's no retest. But you could shoot as running backwards, but that was it. This unit was leaving the back.
And again, you had to travel in a direct line.
That's
Yeah, it was.
so. I will say. Was this the last time Night Lords were good? Because I assume they were -1 leadership at this stage. Because that has always been a useless rule they've always had.
Well, Tyranids used to do crazy stuff because anybody within Synapse just didn't check. They just never left.
And orcs could kill orcs, right? In order to pass it. Yeah. But normal armies, that I'm happy that one's gone. Let's touch real quickly because we're going to do a lot more of this next week. We talk about data sheets, characters. So characters and units. It sounds like 2 characters. There's independent characters and non-independent characters. And non-independents, I guess would a non-independent be a sergeant? Is that how that would work?
It's just, no, kind of. But sergeants were part of the unit. Independent characters are people that would wander around. Non-independent characters were basically monsters, mostly.
Thank you. Okay, I couldn't figure out in the rule book because I was like, I didn't see it. But so an independent character.
Yeah, you're right. Stiggs is right, giving me the way, but for the most part, it was that.
Yes.
But an independent character, if they're within 2 inches of a unit, they would join the unit?
Well, yes, but also let's talk about another reason when you could make line of sight not happen. So I'm not allowed to shoot an independent character unless he's the closest thing to me or the only thing visible. So I would take a rhino and another rhino and make it so I can't see anybody except for that guy.
So yes, that was the 2 rhinos were almost touching. There'd be an independent character in between the 2 of them because the rhinos were closer. You couldn't target that character because that character existed. You couldn't see anything behind that character. Yeah, you guys are jerks.
Yes, we were.
I was say, which is why a lot of the rules in modern 40K are the way they are because people would abuse the crap out of this stuff. And it was super common, by the way. You would make your movements in such a way that you would not let people just see one guy.
All right, let's get to the real thing I hated about this edition, vehicles. They were awesome, but they also were infuriating. So first and foremost, we'll talk about how vehicles could move and see. So vehicles are moving 12 inches or fast vehicles would move 24 inches in the movement phase. But no matter what you were, but then I think if you had to move a certain amount of that under that amount in order to shoot your gun.
Correct.
And they can turn any number of times as they move, and they pivot on a spot. So you basically could go and pivot and go. It was kind of the idea, as opposed to modern where they've added the 2-inch thing. So
there was nothing. You could move the most amount from where you couldn't end up more than 12 inches away. Say, for instance, if you're moving 12 inches from that spot.
But, and we touched on this earlier, but I want to dive a bit more into the line of sight of vehicles and shooting, because this was one of the bigger pieces. It was from the weapon.
The weapon itself, yes.
And so if you were close to a wall, for example, your pinto mount on that side might not be able to see anything, and so therefore it could not shoot.
Correct.
And there was a ton of guns. For instance, everybody's used to shooting, let's say, a Land Raider Redeemer right now just shoots off the hull in 10th edition. Land Raider Redeemer had 2 flamers that were on opposite sides of them and had enough range to barely shoot the thing in front of them. So they almost always had to shoot 2 different ways.
That's right, because it was a template, and the template was maybe a 6-inch template, so
8-inch template,
and it's a big model. So if you're losing 3 or 4 inches just because of where they're placed. Oh yeah.
Yep.
Now, do remember also, this was the day and age of the 180-degree arcs. So the side sponsons had 180 degrees, which means there was a blind spot in front of the Land Raider.
That is true. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh God.
So you would have to
So if you didn't want to get flamed, you just run up to the front of it and like Tiananmen Square
you could
style.
Stand directly in front of it and it could not shoot you.
Oh, is this why everything had a a bulldozer on the front of it in this edition?
A lot of that. Well, you also had you'd have the front facing stuff and the side facing stuff. You choose different guns depending on where they're going to shoot.
So if I was a Lehman Russ and I want to shoot, am I allowed to turn that top turret as much as I want when it comes time to shoot, or no?
Yes. However, you couldn't pivot if somebody was touching you.
I couldn't turn the gun.
You couldn't turn the model, and you couldn't turn any gun that would actually hit another model.
Interesting. So this is back when the Gretchen would touch a tank and the tank was useless.
Well, it's also like you could charge something like a Tyranid. You could charge like a Hive Tyrant.
Okay.
If you didn't want anybody to shoot to the right, you would put the Hive Tyrant when he charged on that side, and they couldn't move the guns to turn this way.
Oh, I like that. So the Hive Tyrant would just basically block the gun from turning. All right.
Pretty much.
All right.
And then the bigger thing in this is that you had armor values. So we had up to 14 was the maximum armor value, but it would also be the facings. You had a front facing, you had a side facing, and you had a rear. And that was super easy when you had squares. However, it was super wacky when you had not squares.
I hate
because
this.
It went on angles.
Yeah.
So we had to, depending on where you were, you would figure out what you were facing, and it could be more than one. So if Sniggs was shooting my battle wagon and 3 guys were on front facing and 3 guys were on side facing, you'd have to shoot all those guys separately.
Yeah, I just want to.
And it got ridiculously worse because like the battle wagon may have been a bad example, but the Dark Eldar Raider was.
There we go.
It had no front.
Yeah, it has no front at all.
Then that's what I was going to say. Like, because it was designed to be 45s. It's 45 degrees off. And
Yeah, but the models did not let that happen at all.
They did. On a Rhino, it did. In the rule book, it's a picture of a Rhino. A Lehman Russ. Anything on that Chimera platform, it's basically a brick. Got it.
The game is based on Marines, period.
And then there's the Wave
Serpent.
And the Raider. And whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's just so many things that are like, this one's shaped like a banana.
So once we found out what armor value, so I get my guys to the side and I want to shoot armor value 12. I would get the strength of my weapon plus D6. That's after I hit. Mm-hmm. And then if I equal it, I get a glancing hit. If I beat it, I get a penetrating hit, unless it was a fast vehicle and it moved. And then you can only get a glancing hit. And the glancing hit chart should be, I think, right here when we look at it.
So before we get into glancing, I just want everyone to understand one really important thing. When you look at the data sheet for a vehicle, you'll notice that there's something not there. Wound total. There is no number of wounds on a vehicle because this is how vehicles were handled. So I have up now the glancing hit, actually, and ordnance hit, but that's not really as interesting, but the glancing hit chart.
Ordnance meant very little. There wasn't that many ordnance weapons. So glancing hit was the hardest because you could only blow it up on a 6.
Yep.
So, and then then you had immobilized, you had blow up a weapon.
I'll read through them. So let's read through them real quick. So on a 1 to a 2, so if you get your glancing hit, or a 1 to a 2, the crew is shaken. So the vehicle cannot shoot next turn. Embarked troops may disembark and the vehicle can still move. On a 3, the crew gets stunned. And if the crew is stunned, the vehicle cannot move or shoot next turn, and no one inside can get out.
And a pause on this. This is why so many vehicles, though, for instance, Eldar had Spirit Stones, other people had other things that could do it. You would ignore all of those results.
Yeah. Then number 4, so you roll a 4 out of the 6. So remember, it's not cumulative. You just have to roll whatever it is. You become immobilized.
It's for each one.
Yeah. The vehicle is then, if you get immobilized, it doesn't move for the rest of the game. It's there. On a 5, the armaments are destroyed. So it can move, but it can't shoot the rest of the game.
And this is a cool thing, though. If you had a vehicle with a bunch of weapons and you got another weapon destroyed, if you don't have any more weapons left, then you would actually blow up.
Oh yeah, sorry, it's one of the vehicles. Like one of the vehicle's weapons, chosen by the attacker, by the way, not by the defender. So if I hit your Lehman Russ, you're probably going to keep one of the sponsons.
Yep.
And then on a 6, the vehicle's gone. So there's no wounds. So I hit you with a las cannon. You are a land raider. I get a glancing hit. I get a 6. You don't have a land raider anymore.
Yep.
Now, you do want to add into this that immobilized automatically destroyed all Eldar vehicles.
Pretty much.
Oh, really? Oh, cool. That's always fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Immobilized results just immediately destroyed any skimmer.
Because it was flying.
Because I guess, yeah, it's hard. You don't do very well when you're flying and all of a sudden your engines turn off.
Yeah.
Now,
It's worse.
I do need to ask, was it this edition, second edition, or fourth edition where immobilizing twice destroyed the vehicle?
It was fourth, but
Okay, so we're again blending third and fourth.
Yeah. Well, it's third
We
and
are
fourth
talking
are,
like
are
26
very, very similar.
years ago. It's
No,
okay if we're
well,
not
because-
dead on.
Yeah, but it's also in additions where you go third, basically third went into fourth. Fourth was 3.5, and then we had a new addition at fifth, and then 6 was 5.5. So
And 7 was a disaster.
in seventh we don't talk about. It's a bad
Oh,
place.
7.
And
We
no
have a
one
lot
goes
of casts on 7. Just people crying in a corner talking about something. Like, all right, but let's do Brad's favorite, penetrating hits. So let's say my strength and my D6 roll do beat the armor, and it's not a fast moving. This one, we add a party. On a 1, the crew is stunned, just like in glancing. On a 2, it's immobilized. On a 3, the armaments are destroyed. On a 4, the vehicle's destroyed. But now we
Hold
get
on.
5
Go
and
to,
6.
go to 5 and 6 here.
But 5 and 6 is where the party happens. So
5 is the best one.
yes,
At 6, if things blow up, whatever, you actually get out inside the crater. So 6, the vehicle explodes. The guys have to get out inside the shadow of the vehicle, which, by the way, can't even happen anymore because the models are so much bigger
Yes.
than the vehicles we cruise in. But at the time, if you blew up a truck, everybody had to get out inside the crater of the truck, and you used to have markers where your craters were. So you'd mark them because the crater stays there for the rest of the game as terrain.
Yeah.
So that was cool. However, when you're going for pure wackiness,
hold on. You missed the
Yeah.
detail, Brad. Hold on. You missed the detail. The models get out and they all suffer a wound
true.
on a D6 of 4+. So
Yep.
you also would roll through and they would all get out and then they might just all die. They have 50% chance to die, although they would get an armor save, though. Interesting.
but the better one, because it was pure random
5 is
craziness.
brutal. Yeah.
Penetrating 5, the vehicle blew up, but also moved D6 in a random direction.
Yep.
If that direction took you off the board, and when I say off the board, I mean any off the board. If a little piece of your vehicle came off the board, vehicle's gone, including everyone inside.
But what I was wondering, I couldn't figure out is what happens if in that range you hit other models? Does anything happen?
Yes.
Yes.
That I believe it was strength equals to the armor value
But
of
that,
the
that was in a,
vehicle.
that was in a white dwarf, though. I don't even know if that was in the base rules.
It's not in the base
But yeah,
rules, but
that-
that's it's not in the base rules, but that's the kind of thing I can
But
see them
ba-
cleaning
back,
up.
Back
That's why I'm
then,
asking.
white dwarves were, you
Yeah.
had to have white dwarf because they gave you rules almost every month.
Yeah. Yeah. If the vehicle landed on something, I believe it was strength equal to the armor value or 10, whatever was higher. And it was considered AP 2 or 3.
And I
Oh,
think it hit,
God.
did it hit back armor all the time, I think?
Yeah.
Whatever. You had ramming is what you could do, though.
Yeah, and there was also rules for ramming, and there were numerous games where people would have a vehicle too close to a vehicle, it would blow up, land on the other one, blow up, land on another one.
And remember, we all, if you're going second and your opponent blew something up, if you play like a land raider or something, we only had 12 inches up. You know what I mean? So if you were behind a piece of terrain and you deviate a couple 6 inches, you would just be off the board. So you'd lose, 8 Terminators and a captain in your land raider.
Yep.
I can't tell you the amount of times I've seen somebody just shake hands on turn 1 because they got 2 penetrating hits and 2 vehicles flipped off the board. And they're like, well, that's about all I got.
At a 1750, I'm out 1150 of it, so maybe I shouldn't bother playing this game. Fair enough.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's funny because I will say I don't see as much randomness in this edition as I do in more of the modern 40K. I can see a lot more that like there's random, don't get me wrong, but it's like the strategy is a lot dirtier. Yeah.
We also skimmed over tank shocks.
Yeah,
So
you know what? I'm going to do tank shock next time because I want to talk about because the reason why is we talk about tank shock, we can talk about it, but when you talk about tank shock with some of the vehicles, some of the data sheets, it makes a lot more sense of like, oh God, that's devastating, and especially in the Eldar vehicles because the speed they could move at made tank shock a lot dirtier.
Yeah, because you can tank shock stuff off the board.
Exactly, and that's where like you talk about tank shock, like why would that matter? Well, here's a movement ratio. But so what I want to do from here is next week is I want to dive into actually some data sheets. We're going to, kind of a mix of what was good, what was bad, and what was busted to the end of the earth. For people watching this, I have a picture of Eldrad up for exactly that reason, because Eldrad was kind of busted to the end of the earth.
What?
But it's always nice when the data sheet says only allowed in a 2,000 point army. And even with that, a bunch of TOs went, yeah, still no.
Well, also, if you look at it, it says you have to get your opponent's permission.
Oh, you're right. Oh, yeah. So next week, that's going to be, we're going to focus more on some of how the units did. And then I think we may end up actually having to do on third edition, then eventually dive into 3.5 because third edition had 2 editions dumped inside of it. Thanks, Chaos Space Marines.
Black Book for the win.
Well, yeah, I mean, it might be arguably the best the Chaos Space Marine Codex of all time was in this edition. So,
yes,
yeah, that just it is
so good.
But yeah, and I also want to spend some time next week talking a bit more about Dark Eldar and some of the Xeno factions. But yeah, we're over an hour, right close to an hour, so it feels like a good time to stop. So thank you all for watching. It's been the history of 40K. We'll see you in a fortnight.